Welcome to the Illuminating Primary Care podcast.
Welcome to this episode of the Illuminating Primary Care podcast. I'm Alexa, one of the consultants at Menlo Park, and on this episode, I'll be chatting with GP partner Dr. Rebecca Ennis from Western Avenue Medical Centre in Chester and chatting to her about her route to partnership not too long after qualifying. So if you're interested in possibly going down the partnership route yourself, please stay tuned to hear Becky's story and what she's learned so far. So, hi Becky.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem.
Do you just want to start by giving our listeners a bit of a brief overview of your medical career and how you came to the decision to choose GP as your speciality?
Yeah, sure. So initially, I suppose it's a bit of a journey. When I finished school, I did psychology. And after that, I wanted to get a job. So I got a job as a pharmaceutical rep, which was just guided to me by my mum, who was a medical secretary. Sounded quite interesting, learning lots about medicine. And I ended up moving down to Chester with that from Yorkshire. As soon as I started in that role, I realised how interested I was in medicine. And before that, a career in medicine hadn't really crossed my mind, to be honest. So that kind of thought lingered with me through the job. And I decided eventually, after about 3 years, to take the leap. So I had to resit my biology A-level. And then I got a place at Liverpool Uni on the 4-year course, so the grad entry course, which was perfect. When I did first go into uni and medicine, I didn't want to be a GP, to be honest. I think working as a pharmaceutical rep, I'd experienced lots of different types of GPs, and I suppose hadn't got a full impact on what a truly good GP was. But actually, through some of my placements in my 4th year, my 5th year, I had some amazing placements with really brilliant GPs, and I realised how diverse the role was and how interesting it was, and that really sparked my interest from there, to be honest.
I agree. It must be really interesting because every day must be just so different, giving you loads of variety, like you say, lots of ways to diversify and, progress your career as you have done.
Absolutely.
So, in the midst of the current GP recruitment and retention crisis, loads of practices are struggling to attract new GPs. So, what exactly was it about the practice that you joined as a partner that made it a really attractive option for you?
So I suppose I'll just take you back to my couple of first jobs that I had before I started at my surgery. And I had 2 salaried roles before that. It was quite a difficult time actually when I got a job because it was in the midst of COVID. So there wasn't a lot of locuming out there. So I felt like I had to take a job as with some security. My first role that I took was quite tough, and I didn't last very long in it, to be honest. I quit after 6 weeks. And then my second job, I got through a friend in Wrexham, and I worked there for a year. But through some of the locuming, I met the practice manager at the surgery that I'm at now. He'd mentioned quite a few things about the practice. A couple of things were it had a community store attached to it. It had a garden on the practice site, which was for the community. There was loads of social things that the practice got involved in. He also mentioned to me lots about like the work-life balance and how the current GPs had tried to really push for that and found that really important. So I went and did some more locums there, and realised I really liked it and kind of took the leap and took the job on with a friend and started as a partner there last September.
Right. It is really refreshing to hear that your practice do place so much emphasis on a good work-life balance. It's, so vital, isn't it, in terms of retaining GPs within primary care. I've mentioned to you earlier that we previously hosted 2 podcasts recently focused on the topic of burnout. So, I completely understand how much it should be a priority. So how does your practice manage to strike that balance? What do you do differently to be able to offer such good work-life balance?
I suppose what they focused on were numbers of patients that you see. In the first practice that I worked in, they really heavily focused on dealing with everything on the day, having large numbers of patients on your list, which really means that you can't manage anything properly. in this job, we have reduced numbers. So according to the BMA contract, what we should have. So we actually only see 11 patients in the morning and 9 patients in the afternoon. But what that means is that we can manage all the additional things that comes into the role of being a GP. So all the additional admin, any emergencies, all the home visits and things like that. So it just gives us that time and that to manage everything properly, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is unheard of.
Yes.
And did you view many surgeries then before finding your current partnership position?
I had worked at quite a few as a locum, and I think, but the only problem is as a locum, you don't get the full extent of what's actually happening. And to be honest with you, I was really quite shocked at the differences between how practices work. You kind of just assume as a GP that every practice works the same, but actually, because they're managed by different people, those partners have got different visions, and I suppose you need to get to the practice that has the same vision as you, and what you want to get out of your job.
Absolutely, a really useful way though to try before you buy, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how much exposure did you have to the financial and contractual issues before you decided to commit to your partnership?
Well, this isn't definitely not my strong point. So when I was given the accounts review, but to be honest with you, I didn't really understand them. So I used friends who were GP partners just to have a little look at them. So I suppose I probably was a little bit naive going into it, but I felt fully supported by the practice manager that I had. So yes, probably not the best exposure, but I suppose it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah, and really good that you did have friends that could assist you with that, and the fact that you could draw up a brand new partnership agreement amongst yourselves. It is quite a unique situation to be in, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, shall we talk about the team at your practice? What do you think you're really good at?
So I always praise everyone that works in our surgery because they are so good. Everyone works really well together. I think communication is really important, and ensuring that everyone feels that it's safe to speak up in the practice. So we have practice meetings on a weekly basis, but obviously we've got an open door policy. I'm pretty easy to talk to, so people can just knock and come in if they've got any issues. And do you know what? You can really tell that people enjoy their job. People are happy when they come into work, and that makes a massive difference to working in a happy environment, to be honest. And the staff are really good at the job. For example, things like triage. So a lot of surgeries do telephone triage still. We don't do that anymore. We don't feel that we need to do it because actually reception are very good at it. And we have access to physios, occupational therapy, we have dietitians, we have mental health. So they can book into those services without actually needing to see the GP. So actually at our
Yeah.
practice, the patients are seeing the right person at the right time. So a lot of people, for example, mental health, they'll come and see the GP first when actually they don't need to see the GP. They need to see a mental health practitioner to get the right kind of help that they need. And that saves a GP appointment. In my previous surgeries, I was seeing so much mental health, and the surgery that I work in is in a very deprived area, and I don't see half of what I used to see because the staff know where to put the
Navigate.
patient.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there any areas within the practice that you are actively improving on currently?
Yeah, so couple of things, but to be honest, there was nothing dramatic that needed changing. Everything was working well. It was main things were just streamlining things a little bit better, looking at how prescriptions are dealt with, getting individual GPs to cover a certain number of prescriptions, just improving things like AccuRx templates. So it meant that we don't have to necessarily have a consultation with the patient. We can send out a text. Clinical meetings that we introduced and doing hot topics in those. And we've also just started to become a training practice, which is something I've always wanted to do. So we started taking on medical students. We'll start taking on F2s from September. But that allows us to keep us up to date as well with all our learning. It's great.
Absolutely. It does sound like all those small improvements that you've made make for an even better working environment. When I'm speaking to GPs, when I'm registering them, the top three things that they're usually looking for, a 15-minute appointment, some regular meetings with clear communication. That's always really what's mentioned. And really exciting that you're becoming a teaching and training practice too. Like you say, it keeps you up to date while supporting future doctors. So with the primary care landscape changing, do you have any strategy for navigating these uncertain times, and do you have a vision for the future for the practice?
I think that's a pretty difficult question to answer, because I think at the moment it's very unknown, isn't it? With the new contract, I think it's quite difficult suggesting that need to offer an appointment to every patient that contacts the surgery, because obviously this poses some difficulties. We do have good access in our surgery, so we are quite lucky, but I know a lot of practices will really struggle with this. And of course, the budget's ever changing, so that's a challenge. We don't get as much money in the practice, but we have to obviously increase people's pay and things like that. We're trying to keep up to date with things. We have GP Confederation meetings, which is like Cheshire region of all changes that are happening. But at the moment, everything seems fine, and we don't have great plans to change things, and because it's working well.
That's great. And what lessons would you say that you've learned so far as a partner?
So I suppose I'm still learning, to be honest, because it's been about 9 months now. But I'd say that there's so much more to being a GP than just seeing patients. Managing people, I'd say, is probably been a challenge. So the staff in the premises, so, dealing with if there's something wrong or things like that, things that you wouldn't be expecting to deal with as a GP, to be honest. The finances, like I alluded to previously, again, that's very complicated, a lot of which is dealt with through the practice manager, but things that we have to make decisions on, which will affect budgets and things like that. One, for example, is with the community store next door to us. We were having to pay £4,000 a month for that to fund it out of our budget, which is quite a lot of money because it's coming out, obviously, out of patients' money. But it was providing a great social kind of hub for patients. But we've managed to get some charity involvement. So we're funding £3,000 of that. But just little things like that where you're having to think, can we afford to do this? And the other things I really enjoy actually working as a PCN, so as the collective group, which adds a different dimension to the job, looking at how we bring into additional roles into the services and what we might need as a practice for our patients. But I think there's so much more for me to learn, to be honest, and I probably will be for the next 10 years.
Always is, yeah, I agree. And finally, in your opinion, what does the government need to do to address the shortages of GP in primary care and make it a more sustainable career path?
Again, another difficult question. I would say GP is a great job. I love it, but I've got friends who have started with me and stopped being a GP because they've just felt that it's unmanageable, finishing so late at night, not having any time. But I think obviously they've introduced that junior doctors have to do placements within GP. So I think that will help if they put into nice GP practices, of course. I think, like you mentioned before about the 15-minute appointments, I think that makes a difference. I didn't mention previously, but we have changed to 15 minutes, which again makes a difference. I think if people could come and look around our surgery, they would see how lovely it is. And if every place was like ours, I think people would want to be a GP because it's a great work-life balance, to be honest. But I think recently GP have had quite a bad publicity and maybe a lot of incorrect. People think, that we're not seeing patients because of COVID and things like that. So I think that impacts on how people coming into the career kind of think about it. But definitely needs a lot more money. But I suppose the whole NHS needs more money, doesn't it? It's saturated at the moment. So I don't have a great answer to this, but I think it's just finding the right practice and people will realise that actually it is a nice job to do.
It does sound like your practice has got the balance just right, and recognise the importance of preventing burnout, and if only more could follow suit. Yeah, absolutely. I think GP would be a more attractive career path, and absolutely here's to way more funding into primary care.
Absolutely, I agree.
Thank you so much for your contribution today, Becky, and to the continued success of your practice. And please do join us on the next episode of Illuminating Primary Care.
Thank you.